Hi, this is Jim with Shiloh Kahal with a commentary on Matthew 24. Let me just first say this passage has been part of my life for a very long time because I have been part of the discussion, or I've been indulged myself, embraced the discussion on rapture discussions. I started out with the pre-trib rapture picture because that's what I was taught in the church. Went kicking and screaming into what is called the pre-rapture picture, which I still think is probably the most correct of the two, although it could be what some would call post tribulation rapture. But but let me just say, I mean, I've lost. I'm not quite as focused on, because at that time I was in eschatology and what would happen in our lifetimes, and what would happen in the end of days and such. So I was focused on that. If you're not familiar, a pre-trib rapture picture, in all of the rapture pictures, there's a discussion about this 7 year period of time at the end of time. That for some, if you're in the rapture pictures and in some of the other camps, you would understand that to be Daniel's 70th week, and that's fine. But there's certainly a 7 year period of time that defines the last period of time for mankind. And when we get into Revelation, there's a lot of tribulation that is shared there. And historically, and if you're in the pre-trib rapture picture, you read all of that tribulation to be as though it's the wrath of God taking place. And that's just not the case. So much of that, what they ascribe to tribulation by and through and from Yahuwah, is really just nothing more than conditions on earth by and through the earth's own evil leaders and people, and it's a fallen world, and so it's just what is taking place in that time. And then we do have the Antichrist on the scene, which is basically Satan and his plans being unfolded in those days. So much of what we read in Revelation, and as a pre-tribulation rapture person, typical, if you're just listening to much of the teaching in the church, then you would understand all of that revelation to be tribulation by and from Yahuwah, the wrath of God per se. If you're in the pre-wrath camp, and probably even in the post-tribulation camp, then they differentiate much of what is written in Revelation. They differentiate it between the wrath of Satan and the wrath of this world, the wrath of the Antichrist, versus the wrath of Yahuwah, which I was ascribing to because it is very clear. The day of Yahuwah, which is, if you're using modern translations, it would be more like the day of the Lord, but it's the day of the Lord. But I prefer day of Yahuwah because of how and what I'm reading today, and I want to use the name of our Elohim. So it is his day, and there is a day where he does bring wrath, and it is not like any wrath that Satan can bring. It is the wrath. It is the consummation of the age wrath. It is the Joel army running through the land wrath. It's just stuff that only Yahuwah can do, but not all of Revelation is considered that. And when we get into the seals, most of the pre-trib rapture folks would consider the seals to be wrath of God being poured out on people, but in truth, it's just conditions on earth. It isn't until you get to the sixth seal where, when the sixth seal is broken, suddenly there's a sign in the sun, moon, and stars, and all the people are seeing. They're seeing what happens. There is the sign of the day of Yahuwah, the sign in the heavenlies. The sun no longer gives its light. The moon turns to blood, and the stars fall from the sky, from the Shemaim, and the Shemaim is shaken. So this takes place at the beginning. When Yahuwah comes on the scene, it's unmistakable because of these signs, this sign in the sun, moon, stars. And when that takes place, and you're going to see here in a moment, when that takes place, we're going to see Messiah come back for his people. And then the nations of the earth that are not part of the chosen and elect will be falling on their face and in fear and shaking and because they know the day has come, the day of Yahweh has come, and who can withstand his, who can stand in his wrath? Well, nobody can, obviously. And so that's what's taking place on earth while the rest of us are taking off. So I tell you all of that at the beginning of this, and it will become clearer as we read through Matthew 24. But I tell you all of that now primarily to speak to those who have been told from pre-tribulation teachers that we're gone by the time of what Messiah is describing here. We're already gone because we're raptured out before the 7 years of affliction, the 7 years of wrath begin. And so then this discussion that Messiah has to his Talmidim, which are his disciples on the Mount of Olives, doesn't pertain to a believer, a church member, but it's never made sense to me. It never made sense to me when I was in that pre-trib camp and had no other explanations. It certainly fell away when I realized there was an explanation called a pre-wrath picture where the wrath of God. We know we're not appointed to wrath. We are raptured out of here before his wrath begins. And so we're not appointed unto his wrath. But that's not to say we're not appointed unto the hatred and the tribulation that Satan pours out upon us, which is much of what this will be about. So the church is teaching in the pre-tribulation camps that you're gone, and that this message that he's giving to these disciples is for the nation of Israel, the messianic people, the people, who have something to do with Israel. But no, they don't. They're not understanding. You don't understand. I knew they didn't understand then, but I know even more they don't understand now because they don't realize that they are Israel. If you're going to join, if you're going to be a believer, if you're truly going to be a believer, you're not creating a new entity called the church made up of Gentile believers. No, the Gentile believers are joining the church, and the church is Israel. There is no kahal, there is no church, there is no assembly, there's no what's the Greek word? Ecclesia. None of that exists apart from Israel. It is all about Israel. And so really all of these people that Messiah is talking to, these are Yehudim anyway. They're all part of the church and part of the believers and who he's speaking to. So let me just say, and I'm going to stop here because I don't want this to become all about a rapture picture. That's not what my point is here. But let me just say that if you are listening and you have been in the pre-tribulation teachings for a long time, when you hear what I'm getting ready to read, know that it is for you too, and not just for Israel, or not for messianic believers. No, it's for all believers of all times that we're discussing this. And all things pertain to everyone who is a believer. Okay, so with that, let me go ahead and start reading Matthew 24. And going out, Yahushua went away from the Mikdash, and his Talmidim came near to point out to him the buildings of the Mikdash, which is the temple. By the way, Mikdash is temple. Talmidim are the disciples. And in verse 2, and Yahushua said to them, do you not see all these? Truly I say to you, not one stone shall be left upon another at all, which shall not be thrown down. And as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the Talmidim came to him separately, saying, say to us, when shall this be? And what is the sign of your coming and of the end of your age? But just a quick point, because I just did a video called the Promise of the Messiah, which is the second coming. And they understood, even though he's here on his first coming, they understand that the promise is this second coming. So that's why they're speaking to a future event. Say to us, when shall this be? And what is the sign of your coming? Well, why would they say that if the primary focus is his first coming? His first coming is important, but what is going to bring in all the promises and usher in all of everything, all the promises to Israel and to us, then it's the second coming that's going to happen in. Okay, so, and what is the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Let me get a different pointer here. And the end of your age. And Yahushua answering said to them, take heed that no one lead you astray. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Hamashiach, and they shall lead many astray. And you shall begin to hear of fightings and reports of fightings. See that you are not troubled, for these have to take place, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and reign against reign. And there shall be scarcities of food, and deadly diseases, and earthquakes in places. And all these are the beginning of birth pains. Now, then they shall deliver you up to affliction and kill you, and you shall be hated by all nations for my sake. So, who's he speaking to there? Israel, the messianic believers, or all who are alive at that time that identify with him? Will it be, who will it be? Will it be the Gentile believers? They will tell you, the Gentile believers of the church, and I say that, I mean, obviously the church is full of Gentile believers. That's not what I mean to say. But the teachings of the church that the Gentile church is going to be raptured away before any of this occurs, before any of this delivering up to affliction and killing you. Not for the church, not for the pre-trib rapture folks. They're gone by this time. So then who is Messiah speaking to, if not the church, if not the chosen and the elected ones? Well, then it must be those who, and then sometimes they also come up with the folks that are left behind who then become believers. It just, I suppose, but none of that is scriptural. You won't find that in scripture. That is part of the narrative that they provide for you as they're helping you fill in the gaps in their doctrines, but it's not scripture. And I would also like to say share another thing as I move onto the next page here. And that is that, when I was studying the pre-wrath rapture picture, you will find there is what he is sharing here now that is going to be taking place in the days coming leading up to the great tribulation. You will find parallels as we're in Revelation, and one by one the seals of the scroll are open and the riders come forth on their horses. There are parallels that, as he's describing what's taking place in the days coming before the great tribulation, the seals are also describing us. One seal is opened and a rider goes out, the white horse goes out, and false messiahs come forth, and then the second one is open, and I'm not sure which one is next, the black or the the pale. I don't really know, because it really doesn't matter. They're all the same. One after another, they come out, and there's, they've got disease. One of them's talking about disease and scarcity of food. Another one's talking about what appears to be food scarcity, sicknesses, diseases. So there seems to be a parallel. The point of all of this is there seems to be a parallel between what Messiah is sharing in the Olivet Discourse here in Matthew and what he shares in the revelation to John in chapter 6 of John, when the seals are being opened up. There's a parallel. And if you're interested, I suggest that if you're interested in eschatology, I mean, this is nominal interest unless you're interested in eschatology. The importance is not the timing in some of those things, because your job is to stay faithful during any of these times, to stay faithful to Messiah and his instructions. But if you are interested, if it's a curiosity to you, pull open Matthew 24 and pull open Revelation 6 and just read them side by side, and just see if there aren't some similarities to the seals and what Messiah says is going to happen here. So let me go on to the next page here now, starting in verse 10. And then let me just start back up in 9, since I was disruptive with what I had to say there. So let's just start at 9. Then they shall deliver you up to affliction. Okay, so nation has risen against nation. All these are the beginning of birth pains. And then they shall deliver you up to affliction and kill you. And you shall be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many shall stumble. The great falling away. Are you hearing Paul in Thessalonians? The great falling away. Many shall stumble, and they shall deliver one another up and shall hate one another. So many believers in that day, as they are being persecuted, given up to affliction and killed, as the persecution begins, many, especially those who have been disenchanted by the teachings of the church, they're going to immediately say, well, none of this is true. And they're just going to fall away, and they're going to hand each other over. It's going to be a terrible time. So many are going to stumble, and they're going to deliver one another up and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise up and lead many astray. And because of the increase in lawlessness, the love of many shall become cold, but he who shall have endured to the end shall be saved. There's the call. Our job is to stand firm no matter what. Prepare yourself for all of these things. And if you're really wise, you will do more. You will be preparing yourself now, because if you can become firm in your ability to follow Torah and basically his instructions, the more you draw close into Yahuwah, the more you can expect to be treated as the Church of Philadelphia, where you will be kept from within the midst of the trials that are going to come upon the whole earth to try the earth. So here we are at 13 in Matthew 24, verse 13, where they're saying, if you will endure to the end, you shall be saved. But let me also say, again, I'm going to be redundant. If you will begin preparing now and to begin aligning your life to follow Torah as closely as you can, because you'll see in Revelation the descriptions that it's those who are following Torah that are being persecuted, but also being protected. So, all right, so we'll move on here. In verse 14, and this good news of the reign shall be proclaimed in all the world as a witness to all nations, and then the end shall come. Now, I know that the church is teaching that this is their efforts to get the word out across the world. It's the reason that one of the reasons that they take missions um, so seriously, because they need to get the witness out to to all the nations of the world. But in Revelation, if you are reading, there is a time when three angels go through the skies at the time when it's all happening. One of them is going through the sky. An angel is going through the sky through all the nations. He is going through all the nations and declaring the gospel, the good news, the coming reign of Yahuwah. It's an angel going through in the end times. You know what? I'm going to pause for a second and go find that just for a second, and then I'll come back to this. Okay, so here's Revelation 14, verse 6. And I saw another messenger flying in mid Shemaim. Shemaim is heavens. So let me start again. And I saw another messenger flying in mid heaven, holding the everlasting good news to announce to those dwelling on the earth, even to every nation and tribe and tongue and people, saying with a loud voice, Revere Elohim and give esteem to him, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made the Shemaim and the earth and the sea and the fountains of water. So is this not, let me come back to Matthew here. So this isn't really a study about Revelation today, but if you were reading all of Revelation, you would have seen the timing of all of that is right towards the end. It's all right towards the end. It's, all the things that are going on with the Antichrist and the persecutions and different things that are coming about. And you just saw that in Revelation 14:6, that there's an angel that's going to fly through the air preaching the good news just before the end comes. So let's go back to Matthew 24, verse 13 and 14. But he who shall have endured to the end shall be saved. So here we are at the end. And this good news of the reign shall be proclaimed in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end shall come. I would claim that what you're hearing Messiah speak of here is the same thing he spoke of in his revelation to John in verse 14. Okay, but we'll move on here. So when you see the abomination that lays waste, spoken of by Daniel the Nabi, and Nabi is prophet, put up in the Mikdash, which is the temple, he who reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Yehuda flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not come down to take whatever out of the house. And let him who is in the field not turn back to get his garments. And woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing in those days. And pray that your flight does not take place in winter or on the Sabbath. Let me just also pause here. Not that this needs to be a discussion about Sabbath, but for those who are saying that the Sabbath is not important, or that Messiah does away with the Sabbath, or even if he is master or Adon of the Sabbath, he can do what he wants with the Sabbath. He doesn't do away with the Sabbath. He hasn't made it elective, because here he is talking about the end times and how it's important that it doesn't take place on the Sabbath or on the Sabbath day. So again, going back into the discussions of the Torah and not just the do's and don'ts, but the things we're called to worship and do with them, like the Shabbat and the Moedim, and why they're important. Well, to Messiah, to Yahushua, they're important, and they're going to be important in the end times as well. There's nothing that's taken place, no discussion that Paul has had or that Messiah has had that undoes the Shabbat or the Torah, the instructions to us through the Torah. So, okay. Um, For then, verse 21, for then there shall be great distress, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. Now, I've heard teaching on the pre-trib rapture picture, and they're saying this is the tribulations, that this tribulation is different from others, and that while we may experience tribulation, this tribulation has nothing to do with the church. We as in, the believers, the elect, the chosen. And if those days were not shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the sake of the chosen ones, those days shall be shortened. Now, in Jeremiah, you see that this is the time of Jacob's distress. All of this, what you're describing here in Jeremiah is Jacob's distress. And in Daniel, we get references of this in Daniel. Verse 23, if anyone then says to you, look, here is Hamashiach, and there do not believe, for false messiahs and false prophets shall arise, and they shall show great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the chosen ones. See, I have forewarned you. So if they say to you, look, he's in the desert, do not go out. Or look, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines to the west, so also shall the coming of the Ben of Adam be. And this is the real point in the context of what I've been talking about, which is the gathering, the promised land, and the coming of Messiah, and the promised high. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines to the west, so shall be the coming of the Son, or Ben of Adam, or Son of Adam be. For wherever the dead body is, there the vultures shall be gathered together. And immediately after the distress of those days, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give its light, and the stars shall fall from the Shemaim, and the powers of the Shemaim shall be shaken. This is so clear in terms of timing. When you get into Joel and Isaiah and other passages of the old writings, it is clear that these are the specific signs of the coming day of Yahuwah. So it is, Messiah is being very clear that it is after the distress of those days, after the great tribulation, that that the day of Yahweh is coming. There's going to be in the midpoint of the tribulation period, or in that 7-year period, or that 70th week, however you want to call it, in the midpoint when the tribulation begins and the Antichrist really begins to persecute in earnest, at some point it's going to be cut off, whether it's cut off in the middle of the second half of that term or at the end of that second term. As a pre-wrath rapture advocate, it would have been the middle of the second half, that second 3.5-year period, if it is truly at the end, which would be like a post-trib rapture advocate in many respects. Whether it's all the way at the end of the 3.5 years or in the middle, it doesn't really matter. Whatever it is, the tribulation is cut short. The work of the Antichrist against the church, against the elect, against the chosen is over. It's cut short. And it's cut short when the sign in the sun and moon and stars appear, which is the sign of the son, or Ben of Adam. And when the tribes of the earth see it, and well, here, let me come back up here. When the sign of the Ben of Adam shall appear in the Shemaim, all the tribes of the earth shall mourn. This is Revelation also, when you're reading the sixth seal of Revelation. When, by the way, the sixth seal is this. I mean, the sixth seal is broken, and the sign in the sun, moon, and stars appears. The sign of the Ben of Adam appears. The I don't know that it's worded exactly like this, but the sun shall be dark and the moon shall not give its light and the stars shall fall. And everybody of the earth, the tribes, the kings, the kingdoms, the sovereigns, everybody knows, and they mourn because they see the Ben of Adam and they know the day of wrath, the day of Yahuwah has arrived. Their judgment has arrived. From here on out, they're going to experience nothing but judgment. Many, if not most, are going to die and end up in Sheol, then awaiting the second death. But some are going to survive. Some are going to survive and then become part of what repopulates the earth at the end. But all of them know that from here forward, Yahuwah is coming on the scene, and Yahushua through Yahushua, they're coming on the scene, and devastation begins for the earth. Judgment upon the earth begins at this point in time. And Messiah, through this Olivet Discord, is making the timing of the day of Yahweh evident. And he shall send his messengers. Now, this is what, so we have the sign of the Ben of Adam shall appear in the Shemaim, and then all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, and they shall see the Ben of Adam coming on the clouds of Shemaim with power and much esteem. So when the day of the Lord begins and we see the sign in the sun, moon, stars, the other event that's happening is Messiah is coming. He's coming on the clouds of the Shemaim, on the clouds of the heavens. And with them, he's going to have all of his messengers. You can see in verse 31. And he shall send his messengers with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his chosen ones from the four winds, from one end of the Shemaim to the other. What I'm saying is that this is the gathering. This is the promise. This is the gathering. This is the promise to Israel that they understood and they knew and were waiting for through the prophets. We're waiting for, and that we of the church continue without really fully understanding, I think, how it's so tied together with Israel. We've understood that we're awaiting this gathering of the elect. I don't really know that they fully understand where they're going to be gathered from, though, also because if people die and then go to heaven, where are they going to be raptured from? Heaven? Where are they going to be gathered from? Heaven? No, they're not gathered out of heaven. They're gathered out of Sheol. They're gathered out of the holding places where they are. And if their bodies, maybe their actual physical, the dust that became dust again is actually remembered somewhere. And maybe all of it's going to come up together and become changed and formed into the new spiritual body that we're going to get at this time. I don't really know, but what I do know is that people have died from the beginning, people and Israel who has spread out throughout all the world, and Sheol underneath the earth, where it's being held from. All of the gathering takes place from everywhere. Past people who have lived in the past and the people who are living in the future. All together. This is the gathering. And when we are gathered, this is also the changing that Paul refers to. When we are gathered from one end of the heaven to the other, those who are in Sheol are going to be raised first, according to Paul. And those who are alive are going to be changed in the twinkling of an eye into what we are going to become. And for all of us, the earthy is put off at this point in time. Now, those in Sheol have already put off earthy. Their spirit is down there waiting. They've already put off our earthy. But for us, we're putting off earthy if we're still alive. When that time our flesh goes away, and it's replaced with the spiritual. Whether it's our earthy is transformed into spiritual, or our earthy is just cast off and then replaced with a spiritual, I don't know that yet. But what I do know is that when this occurs, all of us, those Daniel, Abraham, all of us together at one time are going to receive our new resurrection body. And when we receive that new resurrection body, that is also the new covenant. That is the promise. That is the renewed covenant. In other videos, I will seek to show you and prove to you that when Jeremiah is speaking of the new covenant and the renewed covenant, depending upon what version and what translation you're reading, when we're referring to the new covenant, we're not talking about his first advent. We're talking about his second advent. Uh, yes, we have, his blood is the price of that covenant and he is the purveyor of the covenant. But every time that Paul or anybody is looking toward the new covenant, they're looking future wise. And part of the new covenant is the body that is led by the Spirit. We no longer need the written law because it's going to be written on our heart. We don't need the Holy Spirit to help us interpret and see and find and walk out the law. We no longer need to reckon ourselves dead. We don't need any of those things because now we have it. We have the promise. We have the fulfillment of the promise. So in this moment, he has gathered us. Now, I will. Where does he take us to? There's When he gathers us, where does he take us? I'm saying that he takes us to, when he gathers us up, and as Paul teaches, he's taking us to the New Jerusalem. And if the New Jerusalem is actually still in heaven when we go there, it's okay because we've already put off the corruptible. We are raptured. We've put it all off. So if we go actually at that point to heaven and appear before the thrones in heaven in our new bodies, that's okay. It qualifies. So if the New Jerusalem is in heaven when we are caught up together, and that's where we meet him and stay with him forever, I kind of think that's where it is. But whether it's uh, in heaven, what is currently in the confines of heaven, or whether it's in the sky heavens, because it comes down a little bit from where it is now and into our heavenly realm, the skies here, that would be okay too. I don't see any reason why it couldn't be that. But I really think that there's no problem with us going to heaven at that time, because by the time when we are raptured, when we are resurrected, we now have the incorruptible. So if we are taken up to the New Jerusalem in the heavens where no corruption is allowed, it's okay. And then while we're in that time, while we're up there, I believe that we're raptured up to the New Jerusalem, and that is where we are met, and we are received and shown our new chambers, our new places. This is within a period of time we're going to have that marriage supper of the Lamb, because I believe that Yahushua at first is hanging out up there with us when we were first raptured up there, and there's a season that Messiah is hanging out with us up there, and we have the marriage supper of the Lamb. And we all have this wedding and this gathering. All of this is taking place in the New Jerusalem up in the heavenlies. While we're doing that down on earth, the angels are doing their business, and they are pouring out the bowls. They're pouring out these censers. The trumpets. I think the trumpets are sounding. Um, I know there might be some questions about when the trumpet judgments really occur, and are they judgments of Yahweh or not. It doesn't really matter. What I do know is that once we're caught up, the wrath of God, the wrath of Yahweh, the wrath of Elohim is being poured out on the unbelieving and judged earth below. And it's a season of time that will culminate in when Messiah finishes up with us the marriage supper of the Lamb. Then he mounts up on his white horse with his army, which I believe are going to be angels, messengers, not us. Not, we're not going to turn around and, having just gotten up there, we're not going to be part of the judging messengers that are going down to finish the job on earth. Because when Messiah gets down there, he starts going through and literally starts destroying the armies of the world. And his work down there culminates in the Battle of Armageddon. The world has gathered their armies against Messiah, and have gathered in Armageddon. And Messiah comes down to meet the challenge with his feet landing on the Mount of Olives and breaking it in two. And it's just an awesome thing. And the messengers come down, and it's really not much of a battle. I mean, and the world knew it wouldn't be much of a battle, and it wasn't. But at the end of this battle, and at the end of this time, earthquakes have occurred. So many things have occurred. By the time Messiah and this army is done, and the armies of the world are destroyed, all of this land is now prepared. It's been This is during this period of time is when I if you saw when I showed the promised land, and I showed you that, you know, 1,400 mile square foundation that's going to be in place when the New Jerusalem comes down, because it needs to come down in that land of the promised area, that promised land, which I refer you over to that so you could see how big that land is. And by the time Messiah is done with his messengers, and by the time the wrath of Yahuwah is done, the mountains have been laid low, the valleys have been raised up, the seas that are going to be under Jerusalem is going to be moved out, all making way for the New Jerusalem. Because when it's over, at the end of the wrath of Yahuwah, when man has been judged, there's not much of mankind left, and the world has been devastated. But now comes down, when finished, now comes down the New Jerusalem comes down out of the heavens and to its resting place on earth, and the rest of the heavens and earth are made new for the time of that millennial period. And while we're in that millennial period, those of us who were raptured up, part of the first resurrection, and went to go live in the New Jerusalem at that point in time, now we've come back down to earth to be hanging out and rule and reign with Messiah during this 1,000-year period of time. And so we're going to be residing inside the New Jerusalem, and the world, the flesh that begins to repopulate the world, the fleshly people, this natural people, as they begin to populate. Well, that's where our ministry is going to be. Our ministries, I'm not saying I fully understand all the ministry. I don't know why there would need to be a ministry from one of us to the other, because there's no sin for us. There's no reason to minister for us, except for whatever is involved in the worship of Yahuwah, that we would minister to each other as we are sharing in the worship of Yahuwah. But to the extent that we are ministers and priests to the world, it would be to those outside of New Jerusalem while we're waiting. So, and then we're going to go through this 1,000-year period of time living in the New Jerusalem. And then at the end of that 1,000-year period of time, all of the rest of, we're going to have the second resurrection, and all the rest of the flesh, the earthy, natural people will be judged, and those who are judged righteous will join us in high, and those who are judged unrighteous will join the rest who are now raised up from Sheol to meet there and quite frankly, join Satan and those who are cast into the lake of fire, the second death. So I would like to, as I finish up here, I think that's enough for this. Well, let me just go back to Matthew 24. I've stopped here, but that's because, well, let me finish a couple things. And I'll read this kind of fast. And learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that the summer is near. So also you, when you see all these things, know that he is near at the doors. Truly I say to you, this generation shall by no means pass away till all this takes place. Well, I've heard so many conversations about what that generation is. Well, is this the generation? First of all, is a generation 40 years? Is a generation 100 years? Don't really know, but I believe that they're talking about this generation existing at the time that all these things are happening, the wrath of Yahweh. Doesn't overly matter for our purposes here. The Shemayim and the earth shall pass away, but my word shall by no means pass away. But concerning that day and the hour, no one knows, not even the messengers of the Shemayim, but my Father only. As the days of Noah, so also shall be the coming of the Ben of Adam be. Couple conversations here. Concerning the day and the hour, no one knows. Well, okay. Clearly, we know the season. We're told to know the season. When the time is coming, we will know we are in the season, and that any time. I believe it's Luke. I think it's Luke that has some additional uh, words regarding this Olivet discourse, where Messiah says, "Hey, when you see these things happening, when you see the breaking forth, the sign and the sun, moon, stars, and the sign of the Ben of Adam, and the day of, look up, for your redemption draws nigh." So as we see these things coming, as we are approaching this, and we see the persecution and just the intensity of it all, we'll know the season, and we're going to be looking, and we're going to be looking up, waiting for that day and the hour. So we will know the season, but we don't know the day and hour. We're going to be looking up and awaiting the day and hour. So when the hour and the day comes, great, but we just don't know what it is. But we know that we need to be getting ready because we know the season. Just as it's saying up here, learn the parable of the fig tree. When it puts forth its branch and becomes tender, the summer is near. So you know, when you see all these things, know that he is near at the door. So we're told here that we are going to know the season. We just don't know the day and the hour. And as in the days of Noah, so also shall be the coming of the shall the coming of the Ben of Adam be. Well, I've heard so many people try to, and I think probably over spiritualize the meaning of this. I think it's probably really just as in the days of Noah, when the destruction came, people were surprised. I think the same thing's going to be happening here, that the world doesn't know until it comes upon them that the day of judgment has arrived. For they were in the days before the flood, eating and drinking, marrying and giving marriage until the day Noah entered the ark, and didn't know until the flood came and took them all away. Well, so it shall be also. So also shall the coming of the Ben of Adam be. So they're just going to be surprised. It's going to take them off guard because they are not looking. Now, here is something that always, even when I was in the pre-trib rapture picture, I never understood, because this is clearly after the tribulation. But here's a description. Two shall be in the field, one is taken and one is left. Two shall be at the grinding mill, one is taken and one is left. Well, what is that but the gathering? Not everybody gets gathered, but two people standing at the mill, the righteous man, the chosen, the elect, the Israelite will be gathered. The one that is not will be left behind to face the wrath of Yahuwah. So watch, therefore, for you do not know what hour your Adon is coming. But watch, because you know the season. And know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Maybe he's referring to the workings of Satan at this point in time. I'm not quite sure what to do with that yet, but because of this, be ready too, for the Ben of Adam is coming at an hour when you do not expect him. Who then is the trustworthy and wise servant whom his master put over the household to give them food in season? Baruch is that servant whom his master, having come, shall find doing so. Truly I say to you, that he shall put him over all his possessions. But if that evil servant says in his heart, my master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant shall come on a day when he does not expect it, and an hour he does not know, and shall cut him in two and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So this is really discussing what the unrighteous person and what that person's going to experience and find. So in closing here, and what I started to do, let me pause. I'm going to go find a couple of quick scriptures because I would like to share them in this context. I'll be right back. With respect to really where we go during right after the time that we're resurrected or raptured, and we're caught up together into, I believe we're going to be caught up to where the New Jerusalem is, where we will be while in heaven, in the New Jerusalem in heaven, while the wrath is taking place on earth and everything's being readied on earth. So I think we're up in the New Jerusalem, and here's a passage that I found in Isaiah that I think is somewhat representative of that. And I was already thinking this was probable before I found this passage, but let me just go ahead and share this with you. This is Isaiah 26:19. Let your dead live and my dead body. Let your dead live and my dead body. Let them arise. Awake and sing, you who dwell in the dust, for your dew is a dew of light, and let the earth give birth to the departed spirits. Go, my people, enter your rooms and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself, as it were, for a little while until the displeasure is past. For look, Yahuwah is coming out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their wickedness, and the earth shall disclose her blood and no longer cover the slain. So here we've got the resurrection taking place, I think, caught up into the New Jerusalem, where we're going to be hanging out for a while with Messiah, because right in the beginning of the wrath, it's the bowl judgments, it's other things happening. It doesn't require Messiah to be there yet. So he's up there with us. So we're caught up into our rooms up there. And then we have our marriage supper of the Lamb, but it's almost as if he's saying, okay, guys, it's kind of ugly down on earth right now. You guys go on in your room and just wait, hang on for a little while, hide yourself, as it were, for a little while until the displeasure, to all the things that must take place when I get done there, till it's past. Because I've got to come out of my place to punish the inhabitants of the earth, etc. So I'm sorry. So Isaiah 26:20, go, my people, enter your rooms and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself, as it were, for a little while until the displeasure is past. And this is in the context of having been raised up from the dirt, from the earth. Awake and sing, you who dwell in the dust, for your dew is light, and let the earth give birth to the departed spirits, the dead, Sheol, coming back. And then once we get up there, go into your rooms, after we probably, it would seem reasonable that after we've had a reception and a time, and maybe even the marriage supper of the Lamb, that he tells us to go to our room and hang out, wait until everything else is finished on earth. One other place, give me another second here. I want to go one more place and then we'll finish up this video. So this is Isaiah 60, and I'm specifically going to be talking about verse 8 here. But I don't really think that this context is necessarily associated with the time when the New Jerusalem is up in the heavens. In fact, I'm pretty confident that because of the description, when we talk about what the nations are dealing with here and how they're going to be coming and bringing the wells, all the descriptions you'll see everywhere throughout the prophets of what's going to take place in those end times when New Jerusalem comes down and the nations are called to gather and do homage, and what they bring. So there's this whole description of what takes place in that millennial period. And I think that's what this is here. But I find it interesting that they've got this description in verse 8. Who are these who fly like a cloud and like doves to their windows? That just strikes me as representative of the New Jerusalem, with where we are residing in places and we have windows and doors that we enter, but we no longer, go through go through doors, crawl up stairways, ride elevators, and do different things. We just fly. We just fly like a cloud and like doves to our windows. We just fly up to our abode. I got a mansion. It's it's halfway up that 5,000-foot hill or mountain or whatever, and I just fly up there. I don't have to walk up there. I fly up there. I think it's pretty neat. I think it's a pretty neat something to imagine and think on. So with that, I'm going to end this video and this conversation. Thanks for spending some time with me, and may you be Baruch.